Okay, and we are live. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing fellow author T.A. Bruno, who is the author of this absolutely beautiful book, one of my favorite covers of the year, Down Below Beyond. It's an amazing little rip-roaring ride of a book. I absolutely loved it. And it's Songs of Kamaria, correct?
The Song of Kamaria, yeah.
Song of Kamaria is the other trilogy also, which I have yet to read, and I'm very excited about it. Tom, welcome to the channel.
Well, thanks for having me. That was lovely. Like, I'm like, oh, okay. Now my face is all red. I'm like, okay.
That's my job. It's my job. Yeah, it's fine. So is there anything for people who don't know you? I would love to kind of start with a intro to who you are, and if you want to give a short pitch for Down Below Beyond and or Song of Kamaria, feel free to do that.
Sure. Well, as you've said, I'm T.A. Bruno, or Tom. You can just call me Tom if you want. I renamed myself when I figured out there was another Tom Bruno who wrote some books. He's another indie author, so I didn't want to step on his toes. But anyway, so yeah, I'm Tom Bruno. I write books occasionally. So Down Below Beyond would be my fourth book. And then, as you mentioned, there's the Song of Kamaria, which is a trilogy of 3 books called In the Orbit of Sirens, On the Winds of Quasars, and At the Threshold of the Universe. These books are kind of loosely connected, where they exist in the same universe, but you don't need to read the Song of Kamaria to understand Down Below Beyond, because it's kind of standalone. And I intend to do more of these little standalones in this. I'm calling it Load Space, because it's just the playground we've invented. And yeah, so I like to write science fantasy for the most part. It's which is I used to just think sci-fi was just if it has lasers, it's sci-fi, and if it has swords, it's fantasy. But like I've discovered that a lot of people, when they think sci-fi, they're thinking like The Expanse and The Martian and stuff like that. That's more I like to consider it more of a gradient, where it's like that's hard sci-fi. What I write is closer to like Star Wars, kind of light, fun, actiony. One reviewer said rubber suited aliens, which I'm like, sure, yeah, that's a good one. So that's what I do for the writing side. In the real life, I work in the film industry for DreamWorks. I'm a layout previs artist, and before DreamWorks, I'd worked on live action movies, a lot of Marvel movies like Black Panther, Guardians of the Galaxy, Captain America, Winter Soldier. Those are the sexy ones. So
you're right.
I throw those out there. There's also like 42 and what else? It's like, we were like, oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, but by Black Panther, that's cool.
Yeah, anyway, that is very
so I
cool.
Yeah. So I went. That was all live action. We did basically, for just a quick overview of what previs even is, because it's the best kept secret in Hollywood apparently, is that and I'm looking down. That's me looking into my brain. By the way, I'm not reading it.
Little mind palace.
I don't have I noticed I was doing it a lot right now. Anyway, so previs is basically we take all the big budget action scenes in the movies. Some of them will barely have a script. Some of them will have storyboards or animatics. And we flesh it out using real camera data in something called Autodesk Maya. So it's all 3D animation, stuff like that. So we basically animate a full sequence for them. We'll get revisions from the director themselves, which is really cool. And that's kind of where I picked up a lot of story, like what is, how are we telling this story visually and stuff like that. And so yeah, and then, we pitch it to them. They go out and they use that camera data, they film it. And then they bring it back and we throw, they have green screens and stuff. We'll do post-viz at that point, and we'll put in all the cool, visual effects stuff, but it's still kind of rough. And that's mainly to get it to a screener. And then, the real artists and they'll make it look all pretty. And then there's like 1,000 more people, and every movie is a miracle that it ever gets made, because it's like wrangling cats. But yeah, so I've given this spiel a few times.
I mean, it's funny because I feel like writing a book by yourself is like wrangling cats. So I can't imagine trying to work with that big of a group of people.
Oh yeah. I feel like it's way easier to do it yourself, honestly. Like in a book where it's just like, oh, okay, I have an idea. I'm just going to use the idea, where it's like, But I mean, being in a collaborative environment rocks though, because
Yes.
for instance, the one something I can talk about. We just did Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and I
Which was
felt like
amazing.
thank you. I felt like every single department got to make the wolf cooler in that movie.
Yeah.
Like every single, like the lighting guys got in there, like, oh, his eyes should like kind of glow, and there's, like, so it was super cool. And I mean, he's cool. Like
He's
it's
very cool.
undeniably.
Shout
But
out Puss in
yes,
Boots: The Last Witch for anybody that anybody has not seen it yet. Please go watch it. It is excellent.
there you go. It is. It's very good.
So
I was very happy with
you
it.
basically get to see the movie in a sense before anybody else,
Oh yeah. I mean,
which is very cool.
Yeah, it's cool, but it's also frustrating because we have to then make it. So with animation specifically, we'll do a lot of internal screenings, and
Yeah.
first they'll kind of start with storyboards, and they'll have voice acting and stuff. So, and a lot of the time we try to get the real actors that they've hired to do it. But if
Yeah.
we haven't hired the actor yet, sometimes we'll have scratch voices and stuff like that. But yeah, we get to see it in that kind of storyboard form, and then as this is mostly specifically animation, by the way. As we develop more and more previs and the movie starts to get filled out, that we'll see more screeners that are closer, and they'll have our previs on the screen and stuff. And then eventually, it just kind of keeps filling in, like, not even in order, it's all over the place. But it'll start to have more previs in it, and then eventually the animators will get in there, and then the lighters will get in there, and it's really cool. Yeah. So we do get to see a lot of these like well before. And I've even worked on some back in my live action days where I got to read a script, start previs on it, and then they canceled the movie. So it doesn't exist for anybody except me and whoever else read that script. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
So there's probably some hidden gems in there that never got made.
Yeah, there's definitely though I probably can't. Well, I can't talk about them, but it's well known that there was going to be a Gambit movie made at one point, and I have read that.
Oh, wow.
Cool. But that's about all I can say about that. I think.
Yeah.
I don't really know. I don't, because Disney bought Fox, and then it's super confusing. I have no idea what's going on.
All of the red tape and the yeah.
But that's the real life me. That's what I do in the daytime.
Which is, I'm really excited to get into that a little bit more later, because I just, when I read Down Below Beyond, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit on my script, which I rarely pay attention to. But that was the first book of yours that I'd read, because I haven't read Song of Kamaria yet. And what struck me so much as I was reading through it was how visual and cinematic it read. And that was really cool. And I was like, if I know that you do this in your real life job, so I could like see it more, I think. But even if I didn't know that, it's just such a really incredibly visual story, which I love, because I feel like not all books achieve that level of cinematic just immersion, I think. And I was really drawn in by that. I could see there was so much, it felt so colorful, even though I'm reading on a black and white page. And
that's cool.
So I want to talk a little bit about, and I might just jump ahead to that question since we're on the topic.
Sure. This is kind of how it goes with me, by the way. It's chaos.
It's total okay. This is going to be a very chaotic interview, because both of us are just, it's fine.
Yes, and that's how we like it. Cool. But that's
yeah. Shout out to the chaotic creator kids,
For sure.
So with that kind of a background and working in cinematic storytelling, how do you feel like that translates into your writing on a black and white page?
Oh yeah. You kind of hit it on the head, where I do take everything I've learned from my career and I push it into the novel. And that's kind of like the objective, I feel like, when I make something, is that it's two objectives really. One's the short game objective of, I want to take what I like about classic sci-fi that I've read and kind of modernize it a little bit. I use the term Hollywoodize it a little bit, but I know that's kind of a not cool term. because it gets like, oh, okay, so it's watered down. No, that's not what I mean. I mean, like, what people like about the big flashy, expensive looking set PC, Hollywoodize it from the visual effects artist standpoint, which is always cool, not from the other stuff. But like, I try to do that because, like, I feel like there's a lot of cool stuff to play with in sci-fi. You can talk about modern problems, which I try to tackle that a little bit in my books. I don't try to beat anybody over the head with it. I try to keep it entertaining and stuff, but like there is a message there for sure. But then, and I take kind of the exploratory nature of what's going on, but then I also just want to shove like some crazy set piece action stuff into it. And which leads into my second objective is, if we ever make a movie out of this, I want to work on it.
Yeah.
So it's because it's like, oh, this would be super fun to work on, So it's, and the most fun stuff to work on is the big set piece, actiony, cool stuff. And yeah, a lot of that comes in. And the way I tackle like a sequence like that is I use what I know about from my career, which is like, every shot should tell a story. Every sentence acts like a shot, kind of, I can see a camera angle in my head, and I know the quickest words to use to try and pull that image into your brain, hopefully. So, and I have been accused of not being very flowery in my language, but that's just because I don't know how to write that stuff. So I don't want to waste anybody's time like trying to be like that. I get it every now and then, like it just kind of comes out like that. But like, I'm trying to hit you with like a really cool visual fast sometimes. And I'm also trying to tell a story. It's not empty. Like I feel like if you're writing a fight scene, and every punch should affect something later on. So it's like, a good example is in the Orbit of Sirens, somebody's in a fist fight and they immediately break their jaw and dislocate their shoulder and stuff like that. It's very visceral and fast and violent, but it's definitely changing the script afterward,
right.
It's not like, oh, it's ironically I worked
and then
on
he was fine.
Yeah, exactly. I worked on Man of Steel early in my career, and you see Zod and Superman punching each other for like an hour, and it's like, this can go on for 2 more hours, but nothing's gonna change.
Nothing's gonna change.
Like, so I learned that very early in my career, that like, if it's gonna be a fight, it should lead down the line. So I try to just pull in just the quickest ways to get you in that zone and just not let you go till it's done, and the colorful nature of everything. I guess there's the third objective, is that when I write, I'm writing to kind of like fill a hole in my heart, where it's like I want to see and experience something that I haven't worked on, which is important, and B, just haven't really seen this before, like I might start with an idea you've seen before, but then I'm going to do something to it that affects it down the line, or like just changes it to be new, and and that kind of leads into like, I feel like that's what every generation's responsibility is that, I think I said this sometimes, people kind of liked it, is that we're supposed to see what the generation before us did in fiction or whatever, be inspired by it, make something new, and then inspire the next generation. And that's kind of why I wrote a lot of this stuff, is just to kind of fill that role, otherwise we can do Star Wars till it's already like 50 years old. So it's like, it's like, how much more can we say here? Let's change it and move on, or whatever.
Well, and I think there's kind of a general, not everyone, but it seems like every time there's a reboot of something that is announced, you kind of have this collective internet groan. Like everyone's like, again? Okay.
I've been developing a list in my head of like, what does nobody want to see at all anymore that they keep making? Let's see, Peter Pan. No one cares like at all anymore.
Peter Pan's out there already.
There's a billion, and they do it like every other year. What was another one? I had a list, but anyway, you get the point. Where it's just like, there's some that they're like, why are we still doing this?
Well, and especially, and I think because we're in the indie community too, like there's so much fresh, fun, new, unique storytelling all around us all the time, that I think it kind of makes that doubly frustrating because we're like, but
Yes.
what about all of this stuff? Like, where's all of
Yeah,
this?
for sure. And there's also like just having no producer oversight or anything, which, you know, legally I think I'm supposed to say, oh, I like them, they're cool. But like on the side, indie wise, I'm like, no, it's so much better. They're kind of out of touch, honestly. They don't really.
Yeah.
I mean, I think every time they hit something that the audience likes, I think it's an accident. You know, like
Yeah.
oh, you accidentally didn't give this guy a checklist, so he did something people would actually like, and now you're going to take
Right.
credit for it. You know, so like, yeah, as an indie, it's and specifically a self-published author, I think it's great just being able to pump out whatever I think feels right. You know,
Yeah.
and luckily I've had a pretty good response so far, so that's cool. But like at the same time, it's more refreshing to just not have to, you know, adhere a story to a specific set of things you have seen and read before. You know,
Yeah.
so it's like
This is the
everything's
trend.
done, you
Fit
know.
this.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so kind of tired, you know. So
Yeah.
it's kind of and especially, you know, I'm working in the film industry. We're making a lot of things, as we just talked about. There's reboots and stuff like that. And even in my career, I worked on Man of Steel. It was a reboot of Superman. Superman was already 100 years old at the time I got to it. You know, like so it's
Superman's
like
like,
there's
please stop.
yeah. And I remember when we made that too, people got so angry with the first picture of Henry Cavill where he didn't have red underwear on the outside of his suit.
I
And
remember
I'm
that.
like, oh my God. So we have to fight 50 years worth of people that want to see red underwear on the outside of his suit. And they're not, and they were going to boycott the movie for that reason. And I'm like, yeah, maybe let's just make new stuff where they can't do that. You know, like you can't say in Down Below Beyond, Lavort, you know, he should have a longer coat on. You know, you can't say stuff like that with it because we just made it up now and it's new.
Right.
You know, and that's way more refreshing. I feel like everybody can have a more fun time because they don't have to compare it to anything. You know?
Yeah. Well, I think it's inviting the audience in a different way. You know,
Yes.
instead of just continuing the story, they're at the very beginning and they're helping build it, which is very cool.
Right. Yeah. They can kind of be part of like something cool, you know?
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel. I read most of the books I read this year were indie books, and I've loved pretty much all of them. I've read all the ones I have read that were indie. I have loved. There's been 2 that weren't indie that I did not finish. You know, like, so yeah, I don't know if it's just maybe my brain is just tuning that way now, but like, yeah, it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be around, you know.
It really is. Yeah, I think I'm officially over half of the books that I've read this year now are indie. And I'm not mad about it.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny, I didn't even make a point. Like it wasn't me going like, oh, okay, I'm gonna only read indie books this year. No, it's just those. I'm a mood reader. So like basically I'll finish a book and then I'll just kind of see which one's gonna really catch my attention. Where do I want to go next? And honestly, all the indies are like, I'm like, that sounds awesome. Let's read that. You know, like sounds awesome.
Yeah.
So,
well, and like, you know, we see when we're on Twitter and in the Discords and everything else and on BookTube, we're seeing synopses of all of these books all over the place all the time. And so often I'm like, oh, that sounds good. Oh, it's an indie. Yeah. Not surprised.
Yeah, sounds awesome and new. So yes,
right.
That's good. That's awesome.
James is here, says here for the chaos. We love to hear it.
Yeah, there we go.
And Kevin brought up a really interesting point from Silverstone's books. This. I can 100% imagine this as a video game where you get to like switch between the POVs and play different, have different like abilities depending on, like, I would play Floam in a heartbeat. Yeah. That would be amazing.
Floam is awesome.
I love Floam.
You know, this is cool, and I'm happy to see this is so cool. But yeah, you know, it's funny. So yeah, after finishing Down Below Beyond and, you know, having it published and stuff like that, getting it out in the world, for a little while, I now have kind of an inkling of an idea of what I think I want to do next. But before that, I was like, what can I do that isn't exactly writing a new novel, but pitching this one? What can I do with this kind of stuff? And I could pitch it to studios, which is something I can do. I don't believe I can do it right now because the strike's going on. That's technically considered crossing the line.
Right,
Even though
right.
the union I'm in is not technically, but that's a whole different conversation.
I bet.
But yeah, so I couldn't do that, but it did cross my mind to maybe pitch this thing to some video game companies and see who picks up, because that would be super fun. That and
Be
the Song of
amazing.
Kamaria, I always thought, like when I was writing it, I wanted to play a game where you just either get to pick as a human or an Orkney. And then if you were an Orkney, maybe you get to like do mission. It's kind of like Monster Hunter, I guess, where
Yeah.
like you get to go out and just hunt things, but maybe you can make your little village better and stuff like that. And then the way you would create a character would be if you were an Orkney, you'd be like dragging a body up the mountain. This is all part of the book. It makes sense.
Yeah, I'm here for
but
it.
then as you're doing it, you're answering questions that would kind of dictate, like, Orkney is a big bird, by the way. Certain things about like feather color and, beak and stuff like that, or all that stuff. But it would be hooded until that. And then if you wanted to adjust it after that, I thought that'd just be kind of neat, like visually to see it like moving and stuff. Cause I feel like, Starfield, for example, just came out, which is really fun, by the way. I'm having a great time with it. But it does the thing that most games do where it's like, oh, you're going to create a character now. And it's like, put you in a menu. And it's not really like part of it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I love
anyway, those
idea.
are all, just
make it more part of the kind of cinematography at the beginning, instead of just doing the typical like Skyrim, like, all right, before your execution, decide what race you are.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. Yeah.
Hey, Mike's in the comments. Yes, new stories, please. Woo-hoo. Totally agree.
Agreed.
And Andrew D. Meredith is in the comments.
Just back.
Oh man. Okay, so I want to go back a little bit, and I know this is the question that everybody answers in every interview, but I think it's an important one. And that is, what are your storytelling origins? What were some of the early influences for you as a writer? Your favorite books, authors, films? What inspired you to start writing?
Oh, cool. So as a kid, I loved to read. I read the Redwall books a lot as a kid. I actually still have a few. Can you see it? Yeah. Yep. If I put my finger right here, those are the ones I read as a kid. I kept them. It was just so cool. And I've said this on Twitter too, where I like that I could just jump into any one of those books and it was just a complete, novel story. And I was still set in the same universe. So I understood what was going on. I didn't really need any explanation either. Like, okay, I get it. They're woodland creatures, cool. So anyway, I thought that was so cool. And a little side note about Brian Jakes. I think I'm saying that wrong. I say a lot of things wrong. I'm from Chicago.
I've heard Brian Jakes many times. So
yeah, it's either that or Yaks. I don't know, but we're gonna go Jakes for now.
Jakes sounds easier to say. Yeah.
If it's wrong. Anyway, I drew a picture for him of just like a character from one of the books, and I sent it to him, and he actually sent me back a handwritten letter saying how cool, like he appreciated it and all that stuff. And he even put it up on the website for redwall.org or whatever. And I liked that letter so much. And as a kid, I actually I liked it so much that it got destroyed. Just me showing it to people. Which, in my opinion, that's a great way to, it's flattery at its finest, right? You love something so much, it just like accidentally destroyed it as a kid. Anyway, I also did that for Spielberg, and I ended up working for the guy way later on in life. Actually, which ties back to the question, thankfully. Yeah, exactly. Ties back to the question though, because again, I was reading all the time and watching movies and stuff, but I was also writing a little comic book, right? And it was Space Explorers that eventually became the Song of Kamaria. But back in third grade, this was just a little comic book and me and my friends going on little space adventures. And to tie it back into what I just said, I had sent that to Spielberg as like here's a film idea and everything. And I got a picture, he signed it and everything. Yeah. And then, I don't know, 26 years later, I ended up working for the guy or whatever. On Ready Player One. But anyway, this is still chaotic. Chaos is what we're here for. So I was always telling stories like that and reading a lot, but I never actually thought that I could write a book. I just didn't have the confidence in myself. And for a long, long time, I mean, it wasn't really something you could just kind of do, like you had to go the traditional route, or else, I mean, you could do self-publish, but it was financially, I think you had to be a little bit more stable than I was as a kid.
Yep.
Uh, you know, and
Fair.
so, but now, yeah. And so what ended up happening is, I go through high school and college, and eventually, I got my degree in computer animation. And from there, a lot of that was very one point mind focused on just being able to make my own animated thing. And that's what eventually became, you can actually, well, I did a whole bunch of little things, right? But eventually what started happening was I was developing something called The Last Hunt, which was a Star Siren story, which was the high school version of Space Explorers. Anyway, as I was making that, I got like 95% done with it. It's online now. I believe you can see it through tabruno.com, but it's unfinished. So like I never like wrapped it up, even though it's like right at the finish line of what I was going to do. But because when I got to that point, though, I was like, this is cool. I have a lot of story to tell, and I feel like I'm trying to cram it into 5 minutes. I'm like, what if I just make an outline? Like it'll just, at least it'll have a beginning, middle, and end. And if I'll see what I do with it from there. And it was, I thought maybe I would somehow pitch that or turn it into a script or something. But I wrote this outline, then I'm just like, if I just keep putting words in here, it's a book, right? Like, like I've read enough of these. Like, all I got to do is just keep putting words into it. Anyway, that's a very crude way of saying
it's how it works, though. Honestly,
it kind of was, yeah. But my thought process was that, okay, I have this outline and I'm enjoying just writing about it. I'm just going to keep fleshing it out and stuff. And at the end of this, I do know I can self-publish. If I do that, it'll be real, like it'll be something tangible in the world and stuff like that. And if no one buys it, that's fine. I did it, like that's all I cared about, is that I accomplished this thing, and lo and behold, I do this thing. It took like 2 or 3 years to write the first one, In the Orbit of Sirens. And it was like, there it is. Hey, look at that.
There it is.
That's the guy. So it took me a lot longer to write that one, just because I was kind of fumbling around a little bit. I had editors, and I tried a beta reading process that wasn't working for me. Basically, I was like giving it to like 13 people, and I was attempting to get them to give me feedback after every chapter. That for me did not work. So here's a little writing tip from that, at least from my experience. I know it's different for everybody, but like for me, it didn't work when I tried to get them to do homework after every chapter, and they would just bail. And we just stopped talking about it as friends. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm just not going to brush with them anymore. And but then when I figured out, like, I kind of like got a little defeated by that, because I'm like, oh man, if I can't even get people to help me do this part, then I don't think I can do anything. But then I found a few people that were just like, oh, I'd like to read it. And in my head, I'm like, well, just let them read it. And then, like, if they want to mark whatever they mark down, right, whatever you're thinking, that's all that matters to me, really. Like, after I took in, I was taking advice from somebody who was a lot more established than me. Whereas, like, no, I'm a new guy. They don't know if they can trust me with writing words, and so anyway, I got these beta readers come in. Oh yeah, there.
James has similar experience.
We may have all gotten the same advice from the same spot. But which is great advice if you have a following and you can pull it off.
Right.
But a lot of us, when we're first getting started, it's impossible, if you ask me. But anyway, I got lucky that I found like a group of about 4 people that helped me with that, and one of them is a coworker. His name's Calvin. And well, actually, a couple of them are coworkers, but he was a current coworker at the time. They're actually, speaking of In the Orbit of Sirens and all this art over here. Well, this is by Daniel Schmeling. He did all the things, but the guy who did the illustrations here is a previous coworker of mine, Jason Hall, and he did all the Song of Kamaria illustrations on the inside, and he was awesome. It was so fun working with him. Anyway, he was also a beta reader, is where I'm getting at. And then with his support, it kind of became like, okay, people actually kind of like this, and we want to read it. So, I kept going forward, and, eventually it became a real book, and then people ended up really liking it. And what's funny is, like, I wrote that as like you can read this and then get off the train. I don't want to waste anybody's time.
You don't have to finish the series. Okay, it's fine.
If you read this one, you can get off and go away, because I don't know if I'm ever going to write again, kind of thing. And then after that, though, I saw the response for it and people were really excited about it. And then I'm like, that was fun. I'll do more, but when I
Yeah.
wrote On the Winds of Quasars, the scary thing was like, if I finish this, I have to write a third book. Like there was a responsibility now because I knew
Yep.
I wanted to end it on a spoiler. It ends on a cliffhanger, which I know is I do wrap up the story that's happening there. Some people disagree with me. I tried. We'll put it that way. I thought I did, but I introduced a new plot that is very encompassing. But yeah, it needs that whole extra book, and I didn't want to, like do anything weird to the end of Quasars because it was so cool. But anyway, yeah, so it did that, and then it was scary to write At the Threshold of the Universe. But honestly, it's one of my favorite things I've ever written. And it because I think the desperation like eked out of me as I was writing it, because that took my soul to write that book. Like it was, and honestly, Down Below Beyond, the reason it's lighthearted and fun,
You needed that.
At the Threshold of the Universe was a dark time, man. Like I think I wrote it like mid-pandemic too. So a lot of people don't realize In the Orbit of Silence was written 2 years before the pandemic. And there is a lung affecting virus in it. Had no idea that would eventually become the real world, So I apologize for that.
You're just psychic, I guess.
I manifested it. It's my fault. But anyway, I think that answered the question in a long roundabout way. But
and I want to talk a little bit too about the difference between writing something like a standalone versus writing something that's in a series, because like you said, it's writing that first book. It's not that that's like easy or anything, but then every time you add a book on top of that, there's all these threads and all these things that you have to tie together, and making sure that that ending really packs a punch and kind of, I mean, how is that process different for you in terms of pressure, like how much you have to put into it as a writer?
It's weird, I will say. That's the best way to describe it, right? Like, because so okay, let me organize. All right,
I do the same thing.
We'll start with Down Below Beyond because it's a standalone, right? And then everything I plan to write forward is probably going to be standalones, just because I've already done my little baby trilogy, and that was that was my heart kind of.
You're not planning on any like how many books is The Expanse? Like 14 books or something like that?
I never could figure out how they pull that off. It's so cool that they can.
No idea.
And there's a lot of writers out there that they have like 9 books or 12 books and they're still going, and I'm like, that's awesome, cool. I don't know how they do that. But for me personally, so Down Below Beyond, I'd already written my trilogy, and I'll get to like the difference between that, but this is more current, I suppose. The objective was to write a shorter book that was lighthearted, to kind of help me move on past my dark phase.
A little bit of therapy.
A little bit. Well, I kept getting people that, and I'm honored I made them cry, I suppose, with At the Threshold of the Universe. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't want to leave you like that. I'm pretty happy, uplifting. Like I like to be on the positive side of things. So I didn't want to leave people like that. Anyway, so I wanted to write something shorter, so I kind of tried to limit myself to around 90,000 words. And so, in knowing it was going to be standalone, I'm like, okay, I need to, whatever I'm setting up here, I want to wrap it up by the end of this. And then, which I believe I did both those things, but I also leave the door open that this is a new playground we can play around, because that was the other thing. Going from that, so that was cool. And it was fun to play in a world that I knew I could kind of do anything I want with. It being a standalone, I don't have to worry about what happens next. I can think about that some other time, which I did over the weekend, and now I have a new.
I noticed that on Twitter. I was like, "This is I've been introducing everybody. This is a great standalone." And then on Twitter, we see TA Bruno going, "Is it a standalone now?"
No, that was me going, like, how do standalones work? What can I get away with in good faith? Like, because I don't want to like violate the sanctity of it being a standalone. So that's why I asked the question, like, so can you do standalones that share characters? And you can. I didn't even think, like, a lot of people were just like, oh yeah, comic books do it all the time. And
Mortal Techniques by Rob Hayes.
There you go. Yeah,
Yep.
there's a lot of things. Basically, it sounds like the best version, the way to get away with it. I guess that makes it sound dirty, but like the way you tell the reader that these are all standalones is you kind of put them under a big umbrella, right? So mine
Yeah.
would be the load space something. I don't want to use the word chronicles. I feel like that's overdone, but load space novels or whatever stories
Yeah.
or something like that. But yeah, in theory, whatever I follow up Down Below Beyond with would be, you don't have to read Down Below Beyond. I'm thinking I might involve some of the characters, but I don't know. I want to,
Yeah.
like I said, I don't want to violate the
Yeah.
sanctity of Down Below Beyond being a standalone because I really like it. Like
Yep.
I don't want to mess with it. And then same with the Song of Kamaria trilogy. That's a full, complete idea. Like I'm not touching those
Yep.
characters again, and everything. And I did that. I like made sure I can't go back and do this.
We're done.
Yeah, well, and it's just because you see it in I just want full disclaimer. I like some of Star Wars. I like comic books. I made a career out of these things, and but sometimes they overstay their welcome. So I didn't want to. I wanted to make sure that like when my story is done, these characters are either done or they're just going to help a different story.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like, oh, people died and oh, they came back for reasons, and I don't like doing that. This got way off topic. I guess so. To bring it back around, speaking of the Song of Kamaria trilogy, so the difference between those, as I mentioned, I wrote In the Orbit of Sirens, not knowing if I could even physically write 2 more books, but once I figured out I could, the way I did it was I liked everything I set up in the Orbit of Sirens, and I do have an open door at the end to explore the universe or story more, but to give it, I firmly believe in, if your characters have done something very, very hard, just give them a couple years of peace and quiet. So, and it kind of helps you as a writer too. I like time jumps. So there is a 26-year time jump between In the Orbit of Sirens and On the Winds of Quasars. And from there, you got to the world's a little more lived in at this point. You can reintroduce the readers to, Kamaria 26 years after humans have inhabited it. And like, how is it different? What's been changed? How have, like the Ochnai are a little different now because humans have kind of influenced them a little bit and stuff like that. So it gave me something to play with and run with. But then I also knew what I wanted to drag out of the last book. So writing a middle book is kind of, in my opinion, that's the most fun I had writing out of all of it. And I had a lot of fun writing all these books. Don't discredit any of them. But writing On the Winds of Quasars was so fun because I knew I have to allude to something, but I can also build on what I had before, and I don't need to re-explain everything. So we're just going to hit the ground running,
Yeah.
And I also did it. I also like to, and I kind of picked this up from just how Marvel was originally doing things with like Phase 1 and 2, where every one of their movies was like a different tone and genre almost. Where like, Captain America Winter Soldier is kind of like a political thriller versus Guardians of the Galaxy is a straight up sci-fi, misfits kind of story thing. Those are very different things, but they're connected the same way. So what I did was In the Orbit of Sirens is kind of like adventure exploration novel with some light horror in it. And On the Winds of Quasars is a murder mystery kind of thing. So I take those characters we have from the first one and I have to give them a new assignment, like kind of thing. And it's like they were not solving a mystery in the first one, like this, where it's a straight up murder happens right in the beginning of the book. And then the third book's a war book. So it's, changes again. The tone is very different, very kind of somber, very scary. I specifically tried to draw that out when I had Daniel will do the cover for the third one. Yeah, I told him, I'm like, I want people to be really scared of picking this book up. Like I want them to be like really, really just nervous about everything that's going to happen in it. Yeah, and it's funny when we did the cover reveal too. I remember everybody going like, "Yeah, I'm scared to open this one up." I'm like, "Mission accomplished. We did it, Dan."
Yes.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and then writing an ending too. It was in my opinion, very fun. and I know what I like to see in an ending, and I
Yeah.
know what movies have gypped me of endings
Hmm.
I wanted to see, So I'm like, okay, I'm doing the ending I want to see.
The movies that shall
And
not be named.
yeah, yeah. um,
I didn't hear anything.
yep, yep. I don't work on it. I don't care. Yeah, no. So I knew what I wanted to feel
Yeah.
at the end of my book, and so it was fun to get there. But man, it just it destroyed me a little bit inside. And then we have Down Below Beyond, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
It's got its
You know,
softer moments and
it's
stuff.
funny though, because there's a great, I think, combo in Down Below Beyond of there's a lot of that lightheartedness, but also there's still a lot of more deeply emotionally invested moments
Mm,
in it. And I think it was a really good balance of the two. Because sometimes it's, oh, here's this, deeper theme, but I'm leaning too much into the humor, so that kind of takes away from that.
mm.
And so I found that it was a really good. You actually made me tear up at the end of Down Below
Oh,
Beyond, which I
yeah.
don't normally get emotional when I read. It's very rare that I do.
Ooh.
So I was like, wow, I'm getting like misty eyes here and everything.
Aw. Me too, man.
Oh, it's so good.
When
It's
I
such
was
a
writing
it's
it
so good.
too, I'm like, oh, this is sweet. I try to write through too. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, once we
Yeah.
once we talk about spoilers a little bit, I'll tell you what part.
Oh,
But
yeah, yeah.
yeah, Jackie, actually another indie author who, shout out
Ooh,
to Jackie, who just got named semifinalist in Spiffbo. Congrats, Jackie.
congratulations. Yeah.
Um, Top three
Top
favorite
three favorite
films.
films. This is a hard one because I feel like my favorite films change as I just remember them. Which one?
Same.
Uh, I want to say, and I hope I don't get flack for some of these because, like, I'm always so insecure about. Well, I really like these.
This is
Same
the
with
right
music.
sphere of
Yeah, yeah, I hope so.
nerdhood, I think. To
But I want to say, I in no particular order.
Okay.
Uh, I want to say that Blade Runner 2049 specifically was
Okay.
one. I like the original Blade Runner a lot. I think it's a
Yeah.
fantastic movie. It's not in my top three necessarily, but I felt like Blade Runner 2049 took a story that could only be told in that world and really delivered on it. And that my job is cinematography. So like previous, that's what it is. As I mentioned,
Yeah.
we make accurate camera data, aka I do cinematography in a
Right.
computer, right?
Yeah.
So that movie's a feast. It's so
Yeah.
good, and just a lot of little clever ideas. Anyway, so that's definitely up there. Oh man. And what sticks is I used to have a big collection of movies, and I could just probably turn around and like look at
Look
them,
at him.
but I don't have that anymore. Man, so what else is there? Oof, you know, uh, man, I wish I was more prepared. I should just look up, like, I liked,
Jackie's really putting you on the spot here.
I know, right? This is probably the hardest question I've answered because it's like there's so many movies I really like.
Yeah.
Um, on the lighter side of things, and again, I'm wrong here, or not wrong, but like I'm forgetting a bunch. But these
That's
are
all
what are
right.
coming to my
Whatever.
head.
Three
Yeah,
favorite films. We'll just do three
yeah. I
favorite.
like Grand Budapest Hotel a lot by
I
Wes
need to
Anderson.
watch that one.
It's so fun. It's just it's very Wes Anderson, and I love his style. He's kind of like my comfort watch guy
Yeah.
too,
Yep.
because you could just sit and watch it, and like they're just so fun to watch. And that one specifically too has a lot of just like weird stuff that's super fun. That's another one. And then if I'm gonna go into animation, I want to say Howl's man, I got Howl's Moving Castle. I
Nice. Good
really like that one.
choice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I like pretty much every Studio Ghibli film for the most part. But that one, I don't know. I just like the world of it. I like the look of it, of course. I like how humble the plot is, And I actually bought the Folio Society version of the book for it too, which I have not read, but I should. But it's on my list. It looks good. So I guess that's it. Uh-oh, did I lose you? Is it just me? Are we having tech? I think it's just me. Hold on a second. I wonder if I should. Yeah, it's my channel now. uh, well. I just pulled up the YouTube now, so I can actually see everybody's. Let's see. I can't pull up your comments, but I can read them here. Brunoverse is taking over. Uh-oh. Might have to pull her. We might have to bring this back up. I don't know what to do as a host. I'm not usually doing this. I could talk about more movies. Let's see if I can put it on Twitter. Technical difficulties. One moment. She says she'll be right back. In the meantime, I'll hold the fort.
There we go.
Like, I'll be right. Okay. I was like, I'm going to take over the channel. It's mine now.
Go for it. Tom talks.
Yeah. Welcome to my Tom talk. We're just going to talk about Wes Anderson some more, I think.
You know what? That would have been just fine. Sorry about that. Sometimes my internet blips, and it's really annoying when I do this as a job. So.
Oh, no worries. I held the fort. I was a little worried. I'm like, should I leave? Like, should I do something? But I did it.
That was great. Thank you for keeping the professionalism of the channel intact.
Yes, there you go. I think I did that.
Okay.
I did see somebody asked, I think it was still Jackie again, asked 3 favorite books. That's a much easier question.
Ooh, all right. Let's
I could do that one way easier because I have them all like right back there, right? You know, so I gotta say, A Fire Upon the Deep and A Deepness in the Sky. I kind of tie those two together. Those are by Werner Ridge. I just love those books. They hit me at like the exact right time. Specifically, A Deepness in the Sky. I read that in like 2020. And if you've read the book, you're probably like, oh, okay. Yeah, that would probably be because it features like, people that have come from a planet that was, they survived a big nasty plague, but they kind of worship that plague now. And I'm like, oh, okay, this kind of feels like something. But yeah, no, so it hit at the right time. Those are fantastic books with really, really cool aliens in them. If we're talking aliens, A Fire Upon the Deep has the Tines in that are some of my favorite of all time.
I'm adding that basically to my Goodreads right now.
Oh yeah, it's kind of a long read. Those are definitely big chunky books.
Yeah.
But the Tines are like packs of dogs that each pack operates as like one singular person. So like they can hold things, but it's like a matter of 4 dogs holding something. Yeah. Oh yeah, a little bit of a hive mind, but like a lot more going on with that. Because the amount of them matters, and if one gets, like if there's a battle and they get all separated and stuff, they start to lose their minds and stuff like that. So it's more like a mind meld thing where they can't operate alone. And if I don't know, there's a lot going on, but it's very, very cool. What else? I also just read one. Gateway was a giant inspiration for Down Below Beyond. If anybody's read Gateway by Frederick Pohl.
Okay.
That features prospectors, but they're I took it in a very, very different angle. It was one of those like where I read it, I'm like, that's where the spark came from, and then I just went my way with it. But yeah, that involves, it's a story about there's these mysterious spacecrafts that have kind of ended up in our solar system, and they're all pre-programmed to go to different places. So whenever these prospectors get into them, they have no idea where they're going to go. But a lot of the time they will go somewhere, find something very valuable, bring it back home and make trillions of dollars and be set up for life, So that, or they might go somewhere and never come back, or they'll come back years later, or they'll come back, so it's a gamble every time they go out. And I'm like, oh, it's so cool. But it's actually a really personal story about the main character, the POV character, Robinette. And it's very, very well done. Highly recommend that one. And then there's a bunch of other ones that I could slot into third place, but I don't know, man.
You said this was the easy one, Tom.
Yeah, well, I guess when I get to third place, that's such I want to put every single book I like in that category. But there's a book back there called A Miracle of Rare Design which is very cool. I don't know, I forget who. It's a novella. It's a classic one. It's about a guy who I don't want to give too much of that one away because it's a short book, so I don't want to say too much. But that one's very cool. And it's about a news reporter guy who's trying to get. He goes to like a planet, and he's trying to stay undercover, but the way he's done it is not very good. Like they catch him pretty much right away, and before they send him back to his people, they mutilate him horribly. And so while they're doing surgery on him, they're like, "Hey, we can fix you up right away, but we have this idea. What if we made you surgically look more like them? We could do things to you, and then we could reverse that later or whatever." And he opts for that instead. And then eventually he starts to just kind of keep doing that and go to different worlds, but he keeps changing himself along the way. And it's a very like body positivity, very cool read. Yeah. And I love that. And it's a short read too, but it's got so many cool ideas in it. And that's a good one. And that's one I never hear about too.
Yeah. So, well, I haven't heard of any of those three, so you got new ones for me.
Yeah, I do read a lot of new books too, I swear. I'm reading Ascension right now.
Sure.
Ascension's good.
Ascension is very good. Ascension is good.
It's no spoilers. I'm at the end.
I won't say anything. It's
really good. I like it so far. But yeah, those would probably be my top three. I could talk about books all day though. So
same. That's you should start a booktube channel, Tom.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you've taken over my channel once already. It's not that.
Yeah, I'm already started. Right. This is how that career starts.
Andrew wants to know, have we talked about formally calling it the Bruno verse?
I'm almost thinking we should, right? Like, because it's
I'm
such a good name. You guys came up with it.
Yeah, I'm here for it.
I like it so much, but I feel like I can't do it because it's like you guys made it up. Oh man, no, Lantern, I mean, we probably should.
Lantern Valley, replacing your collection of movies with a collection of books is a good deal.
Yeah, it was mainly I was just running out of room, and I also had nothing to play them on. I was like, I don't have a Blu-ray player anymore, do I? And I mean, I have a PlayStation 5 now, and I think the Xbox can do it, like the new Xbox. And I think my computer can do it, but I'm like, I work on movies on my computer all day. I'm not going to watch movies recreationally on my computer. It's like the pizza analogy. Or if you make pizzas all day, you don't want to eat pizza.
Right.
Kind of thing. So, I started to get to that point, but I had a big collection. I mean, it probably would have filled this whole thing. But
we love to see the books.
I have. There's more bookshelves over here, like past the camera, and then there's some over there that aren't on camera too. It's like I just kind of frame this up nicely, so that nobody at work asks me about this stuff. Actually, one guy pointed out all the Dune I have there.
Yeah,
I was like, oh yeah, I'm like, there we go. Finally, somebody got it.
I haven't read Dune yet. I'm very excited to, and I managed to resist that gold version, and then they came out with the black version.
Yeah,
and I was
I saw that. I'm like, damn it.
Yeah, I gotta have that.
Yeah, I got the other two though. I got the second two. I haven't read the second two.
They're so beautiful.
Yeah, they are very good. And I will say, Dune is one I audiobooked. I did like they did the, I believe it's like I forget what they call it, but it's like a radio play kind of where a bunch of people do a bunch of different voices for it. And that was cool. And I will admit, Dune is long. It's a big old book, and I'm kind of a slow reader. It's a little dry in spots, which I don't know if that's just a metaphor for sand or what, but 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 overall, like when you're done with it, I'm like, that was excellent,
I mean,
but when you're going through it, you're like, this is hard.
As an epic fantasy enthusiast, chunky books do not scare me off too easily.
Okay, you are totally
I'm used to that.
Yeah, I did it. During my normally I audiobook stuff during my morning commute. So if it's a story about mostly sand and I'm also going a mile per hour in traffic, I'm probably a little frustrated.
Yes, it's just.
But like I said, overall loved it. But I just knew it was like one of the slower things I've participated in.
Yeah,
and that's another one. I love that movie. But anyway,
the first Dune movie. I'm excited.
Yeah, and I'm excited.
I promised not to watch it until I read the book, and it's killing me a little bit.
It's so and I love that comment too. But I will say, do that, sure. But the movie does. Maybe this is controversial. I don't know. The movie fixes some things I did not like about the books, and I'm not just talking
hot take central today. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. Like I'm not talking about. It took me, it takes like 35 hours to listen to the book opposed to the 2.5 hours to watch the movie. Not that. There's a few things. It is an older book, so it's got some of the kind of like older tropes that really don't go well nowadays and stuff like that. The movie does not have those, and I think it handled what they were very well.
Better.
So I mean, just look forward to that, I guess.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I'm a big fan of Timothée Chalamet as an actor, so I'm very excited to see.
Yeah,
he's very good.
I wish I worked on it. I want to work for that guy, but he's all in England, I believe. I think he does everything over there, so they don't do previs for his movies here over in Hollywood.
Maybe someday. Never say never.
I doubt it. Why would he? It'd be nice. I guess this way I can appreciate them when they come out. It's not like, when you, again, the pizza analogy, you work on it, you can only see what's wrong with it or whatever.
I worked in an ice cream parlor for a while, and people are just like, oh man, you can get all the ice cream you want, and it's got to be the best job ever. And I'm like, honestly, after you work there for a couple of weeks, you don't really care anymore. It's too much.
Yeah, my wife said the same thing. Actually, she worked for Baskin Robbins back in the day.
Oh, sure.
I'm like, oh, you could put, and she's like, it's the same 32 flavors all the time.
Exactly.
Like, he's like, you can mix them around, but they're never changing them.
Yep. See, the secret of this interview is that Tom is actually hosting, and I'm just here as a guest.
Oh, well. The tables have turned.
Oh, the turntables. Jackie.
Oh,
you know what, Jackie? You put Tom on the spot, and that's okay.
You got my brain really, really going, and I don't think it's going to be like later at night. I'm going to wake up at like 2 a.m. and be like, I forgot about this movie. Or, why didn't I mention that?
Andrew's
top 3 YouTube channels. Andrew's Reads is number 1.
Hey now.
I mean, this one's number. Oh God, see, I've already messed it up.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to say that on somebody else's channel, Tom.
Yeah, that is a loaded question right there.
Yep.
Exactly. There you go.
There you go. Top 3 beards ever.
I actually can answer this question.
Oh my goodness. Okay, do it.
Duke Leto in the Dune movie specifically has the best beard. Period. I don't know. I think it's real. I think it's Oscar Isaac's real beard. Who else? Okay, maybe I only had a number 1.
I was gonna say, I mean, Oscar Isaac can take all beard. 3 spaces.
Yeah, it's that good. It's a very
it's
good
that
beard.
Good. I have joked multiple times that I interview so many people with beards on my channel that I'm about to get a crochet beard and just start wearing it on all of my live streams.
Oh man, I've seen those. I kind of want one.
Yeah. See, Andrew, this is a really mean question because that means he has to exclude one.
Yeah.
I
refuse to answer.
I was going to say, I know that we're not supposed to have favorite book children, but do you have a favorite among the 4?
Well, it's easy for me to say now because it's the newest is Down Below Beyond.
Sure.
Because it's brand new. It's fun to play in this world. I've set up a playground I can play in.
Yeah.
I feel like these characters are easily. The characters in the Song of Kamaria trilogy are great as well, and they feel like old friends to me and stuff. But these ones, half of them are aliens, so like it's more fun to play with that. Where they're like, these are very, very specific to what I've set up here. Whereas in the Song of Kamaria, they're mostly humans for the most part, and then there's some Oknai characters, which are very fun, and they were some of the more fun characters to write in that series. And then the Undriel characters were super fun too. But no. So I guess that is a question I can't answer. I do have a favorite book. Maybe it's the newest one. Yeah.
That's fine.
I guess that's kind of where you want to be, right? Like your newest stuff should be.
It's what you're most excited about. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and it's only been out for a month and a half.
Like a month and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's brand new.
I'm very happy with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brand spanking new.
All right. Let's For anybody who hasn't read Down Below Beyond, I'm going to grill Tom with some spoiler questions for like 10 or 15 minutes here. So anybody who hasn't read it, what are you doing, first of all? Second of all, you can go down in the description and check out Tom's website. And there's a link down there to buy your copy of Down Below Beyond. So go straight to the Amazon page so you can grab a copy, because you should already have one if you don't. And can I just say, like, I know that I have been gush festing over this cover for like months now at this point. Oh, it's so good. But it's so beautiful in person, you guys. I can't even tell you. I opened this and I just looked at it for a while.
Oh man, yeah, Lance nailed it. Actually, it's funny. There is a version of that the very first version he showed me was similar to that one. He's done some cooler stuff with like the way the light's reflecting and stuff like that. But originally I wanted to get it so that Levort had his salvager on him, which looks kind of like a rifle to me. And that was the problem. Because so the first version of it, it's the same pose, except he's got like the rifle slung over his shoulder. And it looked badass. But when I showed it to like a few early, like my mom and a few other people, I'm like, oh, this looks cool. And they're like, yes, but that doesn't look like the book you wrote. You know, it looks like a war book with that.
Right.
And I'm like, oh yeah, it's not a war book. It doesn't go.
All right.
And so I sadly had to tell him, like, oh yeah. And so I'm like, okay, well, can we do, you know, we're going on an adventure. This guy's out of his element. You know, he has a piece of alien tech that is going to get him in a lot of trouble. So what can we do to do that? And I showed him the old poster for The Last Starfighter, if you've seen that.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, the guy's wearing pretty much this outfit, and he's got like the spacesuit in his hands, and he's looking up, and I'm like, that vibe that. Is what we're kind of going for. Yeah,
I mean, it looks like a movie poster.
Yeah. And he really, and green was his choice. I said big, bold color. It's so funny. You know what's funny? I keep trying to get my cover designers to make an extremely yellow picture because I just feel like I never see yellow at anything, right? And but when they come back with something that isn't yellow, like On the Winds of Quasars was supposed to be a yellow cover as well, and you can kind of see it. There's more yellow in it than blue or anything else. But they come back with something that's so much cooler than what I was thinking. I'm like, I'm sure they tried it in yellow, and they're like, Tom, you're dumb. Like,
no, but no, honestly, that bright
not
green is such a unique. I mean, I don't see that color anywhere either. I think that was why it was so poignant on Twitter. I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, and it's very, very green. Yeah, when he showed me that, I'm like, yeah, green. You're right.
Green, excellent. Yep, love green.
Of course, I don't know what I was.
Obviously,
stupid.
That's why I've learned. I mean, you've met my best friend Sarah. You guys did an awesome. I should actually put a link down in the description for that too. Sarah, my best friend, who's an illustrator, interviewed Tom a while back, and I've gotten to the same point with Sarah where we work very well creatively, collaboratively together. But there'll be times where I'm like, oh, I think what about this, and this, and I can always tell because there's like I mean, we could try that, but I think it's going to have this effect instead. And I've learned to just, okay. I just
let the artist do their thing.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Because usually once she's done, I'm like, oh, yep, definitely better.
It's like all the way for sure. Yeah, no, I'm the same way. Oh,
yeah. Lantern, what's the scene, character arc, etc. you're most excited about writing next that you can't wait to sit and write?
Oh, well, we're in spoiler mode, right?
Not yet, officially.
Oh, okay. Because I think they fronted with semi-spoiler question. I mean, if we want to go full spoiler mode, I can talk about what I'm thinking for the next book. But it's a rough idea.
Now we're covered.
I just give it 25 minutes.
Okay, this is your note. If you haven't read it, don't want to be spoiled.
Yeah. Well, and this would be, since my books are standalones, I can talk about this in theory without spoiling too much.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're in spoiler discussion mode. This is a rough idea. It's a very rough idea. So people who have read the Song of Kamaria are aware of the Voyalton. They are mentioned in Down Below Beyond. They made the big portals. And then a bunch of people who were connected by these portals got together. They made things like the Gate Slingers, and then they went and they made the Beyond, right? So that's playground. That's all the
Yeah.
playground stuff. That's not really any spoiler stuff. I mean, the gate slinger is kind of a surprise, but it's yeah. Anyway, so what I'm thinking is what the rough idea of the next standalone setup. So it's not even like spoilers. Is that I'm thinking I would start it with one of these Voyalton. They're setting up a new portal on a new planet, and they're doing their job. And as they're about to go walk over to inspect like the people that live on this planet to see if they're a fit choice to be part of the Voyalton network, there's our main characters maybe, or somebody with a gate slinger on the planet already, just going like, oh yeah, like they've made their whole job totally inert, like where it's just like, and this guy's like, he spent like maybe 2 decades building this giant portal that he's just wondering if he needs to turn it on or not. And then this guy comes by, maybe even like right in front of him. I'm thinking he's walking and like, the portal opens right in front of the guy. The guy walks out that way though, so he doesn't even see the Voyalton. Like, what is, kind of thing. And then this becomes a big problem. I don't quite know what I want to do with that, because what I'm thinking I want to do is I have it so that after this sort of event type thing, people start disappearing when they go through portals with the gate slingers. And that leads into some kind of mystery, what's happening, and it's no longer safe to use them. So but it's, those things are tied together in a way. Anyway, very rough idea. That might
I like the direction of that though. Yeah,
it's either that or I might write a Floam prequel, which would also be a standalone, because that has been like, she's just super fun to play with and stuff.
She was my favorite character.
And yeah, Floam, and it's funny. I don't normally listen to my audiobooks again after it's published, because I try to just like go out and just listen to other people's stuff and all that stuff. But it for some reason I put it on while I was in traffic the other day, and I hadn't downloaded a different book. And now I'm just listening to it again. And I'm like, I still love, listening to just Floam and Bobsy, and I'm listening to it. I'm like, it doesn't, it feels like somebody else wrote it, which is great.
Yeah.
It's so I'm not like sitting here going like, oh, why did I write that? Oh, why did I do that? I'm not like,
you're just enjoying
and I laugh because I forgot the jokes I wrote in it. I'm like, I gotta play with these guys some more,
it's funny because I think it would be sad if people have the idea that, it would be, kind of vain or whatever, that authors would read their own books. Because I'm like, isn't that wonderful phrase, read the book or write the book you want to read, right?
Yes.
So it's like, I'm the same, like I've reread Phased a couple of times, and I'm just like, I just really enjoy reading this book. And it's not necessarily like, oh, I wrote this book, a little bit of but it's good job. But that's what that's all about, right? We're writing these books because we're discovering and exploring what we love in storytelling. So it makes total sense that you'd be like, I want to go back and listen to that.
Yeah. Well, to me, the reason I hadn't done the other 3 as much is because, like once you've edited it, you've done it a whole bunch of times. I also, like when I'm getting the audiobooks, I do listen to it as I'm doing it and I give notes. But Kyle and the other guys too, they were fantastic, right? But Kyle is bringing, if anyone's listened to the audiobook for Down Below Beyond, he is bringing like a different level of like the amount of acting going into it.
Yeah.
And like he's changing his voice like very dramatically for every character. So it doesn't feel like I'm listening to the words I wrote. I'm literally just listening to his performance. Yeah. And they're so, again, I loved working with every one of my audiobook narrators. I'm not just saying that because they're like, like, oh, they did it. No, they want to be nice.
Yeah.
They were great. They were fantastic. I love what CJ did with Quasars and Threshold. And working with Michael Reimer on the first one was a blast because, we got away with a few things on that first one that we didn't do in any of the other subsequent ones. If you're listening to Sirens, there's a character that gets like a voice box thing in his throat, and we did a little bit of synthesizing into it. Cool. It's just subtle and it's so cool sounding, anyway, but yeah, with Kyle specifically though, he had the challenge of doing a bunch of different alien voices. So I think that's why I'm like going into it, hearing his interpretation of like how these aliens sound. I'm like, oh, I love it. And Bobsy specifically, I love the voice. He's like, welcome to the tumbleweed, kind of thing. And he just a lot of oomph in his chest
really big. Well, and I love
it's so cool.
I'm a big fan of contrasting characters in
Oh,
fantasy, and I think that's one of the reasons why Vobsy and Floam just work so well together as a pair, because Vobsy is this kind of big, I mean, he's smarter than, Kronk from The Emperor's New Groove. He kind of gives up a tiny little bit of that kind of vibe, but smarter.
Yeah, he's a little clumsy, but
Yes,
he's got like he likes history, like he's a little
likes
bit of a
history.
history
He's
buff.
got a good heart, but he's just kind of this big. And then Floam is this very tiny, very no nonsense, sort of ethereal.
Yeah, and they were fun to write, specifically Floam too, because she's pretty complicated. She's a thief, but she does have like I said, this is why I kind of want to write a prequel with her, because she does come from like a kind of a sadder background.
Yeah.
But she didn't let that kind of define her. Like, sad things happened to her, but she kind of like persevered through that, and it made it so that she can fight. She's pretty tough. She can do what she has to do, but she also does it with like a stride in it. But then she also does recognize sympathy, and stuff like that. She's not just cold or anything like that. So I like that about her. And what's cool is having, I had my editor, Alana Jolie Abbott, and she did such a cool thing with it where there was a few scenes where she's just like, oh, I always felt like Floam would be the kind of person who wouldn't take a compliment. And I'm like, yeah, maybe she is. Like, you're right. Like, I mean, and it didn't take a lot. It was literally like one time she's complimented. Originally, I had her go, well, thank you. She kind of like sarcastically thanked. But instead, a lot. I hope I'm saying her name right. Actually, I never had to say it out loud. It's sort of, I've only read it. Anyway, she had suggested like, oh, she should just kind of like wave it off entirely, and she just says, oh, I had my reasons instead. But like, stuff like that. So she's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, and that was something I loved about the races, is oftentimes I think whether it's races or species or anything that's being talked about in a book, it's easy, I think, to keep them surface level, and unless you have an info dump. And I think some people kind of lean into the info dumps too much. And you're talking about Floam and how the things that she's been through that are really sad. Her culture, each of these different cultures felt like they'd been there for ages, and you weren't, but it was like just enough information to make me ask questions and be intrigued, but it never felt like I was like, and then Floam's people went here and did this, and like, and it was worked in very seamlessly into the story, which I really appreciated. And you brought a lot of depth with just a few sentences on each one. And I thought that was really cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's my film in me.
Yeah, I can tell. It works very well.
We can't really do info dumps in movies, right? So it's like, how do we show you quickly what and you can fill in the gaps for the most part. A lot of it's pretty straightforward, but then how do you give people information without info dumping? And the way I kind of do that, since we're in spoilers and everything, is Piper just loses her sister, and she says the kind of the off the cuff, uninformed, like, oh, it's not like how you Albarians, you guys don't die, and so she can kind of fill in that gap a little bit, but in a way that's sincere. Well, she's like, we die, but it's not like how you guys die. When we die, we become trees. You guys become memories. I think that's warmer. So it's something sweet to say, but it also gives you information you didn't have before that. And I try to do it that way instead, where it's like you're going to get a little bit of information, but you're also going to progress the story while you get it.
If you ever write a scene where Floam turns into a tree, I don't know if I would ever recover from that.
It's funny because like as I'm just spitballing ideas in my head, and I like that crossed my mind at one point, and I'm like, no, I'm like,
break me.
Yeah, well, because I had the whole scene in my head. And I'm like, yeah, I would cry, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. No, I'm like, I can't write that. And it would also be such a waste. She's such a great character.
She's great. Well, and so the part in obviously there's a lot of the theme with Levort and Bayfo, I think, is really interesting because it, like, that kind of coming of age story where you have these friends that you've had since childhood, and sometimes you grow apart, and when you become a certain age, things kind of change and you're not the same people you were, and that can sometimes become tense and a problem. And obviously for them it was, because Bayfo didn't know Levort as well as he thought he did, and there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. And so the ending was, for a lighthearted book, that was pretty, like, that was a heavy hitter.
Yeah, it's kind of a punch.
It is a punch. But that one got me a little emotional, especially because as somebody who has a best friend that I'm very, very close to, it was just like, you don't ever want to think about something like that, and this is your best friend, and like, but the part that I think really got me was, and I'm horrible at remembering names, so I apologize.
Oh, that's fine. No, that's fine. They're weird names.
But Sevadan, is that how you say it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, that's where my misty eyeballs came in. I was sitting there and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm actually tearing up right now.
That got progressively sadder with every iteration of the book, right? Like, so what was it, the first time it was so I had to go through it so many times. But yeah, I think with the last which is the final version you read, I got the most punch out of that death that I could. Like with originally, so funny, leading it back into a slightly funnier element, is that Skipper was originally something I was going to cut out of the novel. I'm like, I don't think people are going to get the vibe I'm going for. I think they're going to think I'm wasting their time. And then, so it's funny, I do that. And every single beta reader and my editors and Isabel, just everybody was like, more Skipper. Needs to be in the book. Originally, Skipper is the first version Skipper was in it, but I was like, okay, I'll just get rid of it at some point. It just died in the ship with Sevadan, and it was never brought up again. Yeah, but like, it was such a criminal thing to do. They're like, no, Skipper should survive. And it was so funny because my editor was really like, Sevadan lived, right? Like, so they survived, right? And I'm like, and I had to, so in the final version, after she was done with it, I punched that in harder so that I had to cut your hope off. Because like, if you're sitting there thinking like, oh, they must have lived though, right? And it's like, no, they didn't.
No, they didn't. That hurts so much.
And it's an impact, and I think it like falls in line with that character a lot. Like, it's
totally very self-sacrificing. Yeah.
And I think it's a nasty little trick to kill off the funniest character, because then you're like, oh, things got serious. And I always thought
and it's I think what's a little bit of the magic of the story is that, for me at least, I really love the books where you don't realize how emotionally invested you are in the characters until something like that happens, and suddenly you're sitting there with your box of tissues and you're like, what happened?
You're like, they were safe the whole time.
Well, and I think it's
not in my books.
It's also adorable that like Floam is the one who has the plant. Like, I just thought that was fantastic, that she gives it the most kind of like, she gives it the most sentience when she's talking about it, and I'm like, that makes total sense.
Well, it is a metaphor, for the record. Yes. So it's funny, this book does not come off as like a deep dive book, but it is. There's a lot of like little, that's kind of why I was like, before we started this, I'm like, I'd love to talk about spoilers with you, because this is a deep dive book that I not many are diving, because they don't need to, like there's no reason to, so I don't blame anybody for not diving. But Skipper, like I said, I was going to remove it from the book because I wasn't sure if anybody would get the vibe I was going for, but the whole point is like, you don't keep your friends small, so even the smallest little thing becomes an important thing, which ironically I was going to delete from the book, so I was small. But like but at the same time, it became she treats it with just as much character
Yep.
as talking to Piper, and then what's great is that mentality bleeds into everybody, right? Because then Piper
Yeah.
starts to wink at it and talk to it. Oh,
Yeah.
why didn't you wake me
Yep.
up, Skipper? But it's just a weed in a flower pot, and I also just a little side note, I try to put something in every single one of my books that if somebody wanted to be super nerdy, they could make it at home or something.
Yeah.
So weed in a flower pot, you can go out and get a dandelion, stick it in a flower pot, call it Skipper. It's on your shelf, called Skipper. Or same with the Donneran staffs in whatchamacallit, the Song of Kamaria. Those are staves with hooks on the end, but they're made out of basically anything, and so whatever can stick together to make a staff. And it tells a story about that person, so it's very unique, whatever it's built out of, stuff like that. Somebody who really wanted to, they can go and make one themselves, but yeah, that was kind of the original intention with Skippers, that anybody who really wanted to do that. But anyway, you mentioned with like Bayfo too, sadly I have had friends in the past who like we are no longer friends. And there was one even more recently that I would say, oh yeah, so I know where I'm coming from with the it feels like there's never that it's such a sudden twist. But if you were to go back and knowing what you know about Bayfo at the end of the book, if you were to go back and reread the book, that Bayfo never ever liked Lavort. Ever. Right? Like he needs him because he needs him to be small and pathetic to make himself look good, because he is never respected by anybody in that book except Lavort. Right? So like Golna, even when he's doing exactly what Golna says, Golna calls him, basically threatens to kill him, says, if you don't do what I'm going to say. And he, even when he thinks he's in charge, he's not. He has no control over what's going on with him. But Lavort, is his friend the whole time. So it's kind of that want versus need thing where he lets what he's getting what he wants, but it's not what he needs. He needs Lavort, but he doesn't. But he wants his own starship and respect. He gets those things, but knowing it doesn't do anything for him, right? And even like if you go back and you read like, oh, so Lavort gets this score, which in theory, if it paid out, it would probably get him his S-class license. He'd get what he wants, right? Bayfo has no idea that the thing's been zapped from space, right? But he needs to put Lavort in his place, right? So he takes him to the place, the
orphanage.
Pretty much.
Essentially,
sorting facility, right? Where he grew up, right? To kind of want him, right? And obviously Lavort doesn't want to be there the whole time, but Bayfo's like, oh, come on, it's great. He's playing it as a friend thing. He's always treated Lavort like this, right? And you kind of get a sense of like how violent he can be when they're like, oh, remember when we used to do scrap wars or whatever? And it's like, yeah, you put that one kid in the hospital. And he's just like, yeah, but he would have hurt you. In my mind,
I think it's interesting because psychoanalyzing characters is something I absolutely adore doing. So from Lavort's side of things, it very much gives off where he's grown up with this void in his life, and sometimes when we have that void, we fill it with something that isn't as good for us because we don't see ourselves as being worth more than that, right? So we fill that void with, okay, well, maybe there's a tiny part of me that knows this is a toxic relationship, but it's what I've got. So I'm going to hold on to it as tightly as I can. And if I just care about this person enough, they'll be fine. Like they'll treat me the same way. They'll give back to me what I'm giving, all of that kind of very unhealthy coping mechanism.
Exactly. That's 100% what Lavort is dealing with the whole time, because it's just he has no idea what a real friend is like or what a real like relationship is. Actually, I believe it was Isabel that asked me like I should do a blog post about how I come up with the names for the characters, because Lavort is kind of an ugly name, right? And he was given away by his parents. I imagine they gave him an ugly name on purpose, kind of thing. So he's never had a positive relationship with anything. So Bayfo treating him like this pet kind of is a positive thing to him, And until and that's where Floam even asks him when they're walking on the two different worlds having conversation between, which I thought was cool visual, by the way.
Yes.
I mean, I put it in the book for a reason. But anyway, so when she asked me, she's like, "Don't you have other friends on Consonance?" I was like, "No, just me and Bayfo." Kind
Yeah.
of. It's just trying to clue you in, like, yeah, no, this bad
is
guy, yeah.
Yeah.
But what I like, I answered, somebody had asked me what's my favorite character I wrote, and I said controversial decision is Bayfo, actually, just because he is more, you don't really see it as a reader until the very, very end. But as a writer, when I was writing him, I'm like, this guy wants respect more than anything. He wants to feel important, but
he's looking for it in all the wrong places.
Exactly. And he is important to Lavort, like, but he doesn't care. Yeah. That's not good enough, And so, like, I loved writing this mistaken character the whole time. And yeah, sure, it seems like he kind of comes off and like believes what Golna says right away, but to him, this is a path to exactly what he wants, And he's thinking, oh, I can get Lavort, and he's apprehensive to do anything bad to Lavort because whether he knows it or not, subconsciously he's aware that if Lavort dies, I have no stake,
right?
Like, basically, he has to deliver Lavort, and then after that, he has to figure out where Lavort was building a compound and stuff like that. If Lavort were not in the picture, he's kind of useless. You can give a gate slinger to any of those enforcers, and they'd be way better at his job than him. So yeah, anyway, I liked him a lot for that very reason.
Yeah.
But I know he can come off as just a dumb ass.
I mean,
like, yeah. But I mean, there's a method to his dumbass.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's one of the reasons why, at the end, it's really tragic because, Bayfo realizes what he actually needed, and Lavort has it and didn't know he needed it. It's such a completely opposite of how we are at the beginning of the book. And Lavort recognizing, to some degree, he's still working on it, but recognizing, at least in small part, his value and the value of what a real friend should be like, and suddenly he has this new experience to compare it with. And it's this, all of a sudden, this kind of awakening of, oh, like, it's this kind of a, morbid place to take it, but how so often when you have someone who grows up in a traumatic situation, they don't know that it's traumatic necessarily, or like it seems normal to them until they have something to compare it to later, or somebody else says, hey, wait, kind of like Floam did with Lavort, where she's like, except that's not how that works.
Yeah, it's like, turns out it's better than that.
Floam should be a therapist. That's what we've just
I was kind of leaning into that she actually is better at like communicating with people than she is from stealing from them. That's why she's the kind of the one that is pulling more colonists. And although that's kind of like behind the scenes, I do admit, like, that is where one of my shortcomings is, that in an attempt to keep this a smaller novel, I do kind of like just kind of tell you that happened real quick. I'm like, okay,
it didn't bother me though.
I'm glad.
No.
One of those, like, I would have loved to have stretched this thing out, but the whole objective was to kind of like make something shorter. Just to hopefully pull more readers into the Song of Kamaria as well, which seems like it's working.
I'm definitely very interested in it's funny though, because I actually had this one quite a long time before Down Below Beyond. And I was like, oh, that's one of those books, as a reader, it's the eternal, I can't wait to read that.
And I'm the same though. I like,
and that's kind of
why many. I wrote a smaller book, because I'm like 300 pages. I can read that. Like, even Ascension is about that. I think most traditionally published books try to aim for around that. But then when it comes to 500, I'm a little more like, I have to
commit to this.
Many books, but I have to. I'm a slow reader, so I have to really dive in, and it's an effort, So I try to, get the smaller books first. That's I'm that's just me. But
No,
but
I totally get it. I'm
it's kind of the objective here,
I'm a faster reader, and even so, I still, get to those series, especially series where you have a whole bunch of really big books, and it's like, all right, I have to. This is a commitment, So, but I think what is for anybody who is looking to get into either Down Below Beyond or Song of Kamaria is that you have a very accessible writing style, and I think that you're kind of, you talked about earlier that I'm not about like the flowery prose necessarily all the time, and I actually think that really works in your favor because it allows the character work and the world building to just take center stage and really be right immediately accessible to the reader. And that's I blew through Down Below Beyond. I was like, it was one of those chapter tuners. So they're not, even though Orbit of Sirens is bigger, I anticipate that being a quick read as well. So
yeah, I have heard that, and I'm very happy to hear that my pacing is good and that the writing is quick.
Yes.
Like that is how I wanted it. So I'm glad
mission accomplished.
Here. Yes, I did the thing the way I wanted to. It's funny because whenever I see, there's a few people that have read some of the Song of Kamaria books like in one sitting, and I'm like, how the hell? They freak me out. Like, it's scary.
Are you
my
okay?
one buddy's wife read it all in one sitting. I'm like, how do you do that?
How?
It's like,
but that should be huge kudos to making it like a chapter turner where you're like, oh, I'm just going to read one more chapter, and then you're finished with the book the next time you check. And the accessibility of it is there, which is great because it's just easy to fly through and really have a good sit down. And because sometimes, especially for me as somebody who reads a lot of denser fantasy books, like it's so refreshing to because I love those, but I also don't want to read them all the time. So they can be a lot. So coming in and having this, something like Down Below Beyond, where it's just a really fast read that really pulls me in right away, and there's great characters and everything I'm looking for, but I don't have to like read it 20 pages at a time, is nice. So mission accomplished for sure. Also, I completely agree with Kevin's comment. Colonel. I loved Colonel so much.
I keep using Kyle Snyder's voices because they're so good. Like, even if you listen to just like the snippet, the sample or whatever, it's such a good job. But Colonel has like this very deep, really good voice. I love Colonel. He's super. Oh, okay. So we're talking spoilers here, right? This is not a spoiler for the Song of Kamaria because it's literally called the Song of Kamaria, right? But like, so the Song of Kamaria is a tangible thing to the Orkney, right? It's the way the Orkney are. The way I built the races in the Song of Kamaria trilogy is instead, what I wanted to avoid was like taking a real world, culture and adapting it in aliens. I don't think that's kind of an older way to do it. And there's nothing wrong with that if you do it the right way, or especially if you're from that culture. That's fantastic, actually. But what I did instead was I built races based on a scale of honesty, right? So the Orkney are 100% honest. They're these bird creatures that can read your mind. They can sense or they can't. They can kind of read your mind. It's more like empathy. Kind of thing, but they can tell exactly what you're thinking at all times, so you cannot lie to them, and they do not lie to each other or you, right? Humans are kind of in the middle. We lie to each other a little bit. We're honest to each other sometimes when we want to be, you know how it is with us. Anyway, and then there's the Undriel, which are robots that are literally like they were human at one point, but they're wearing essentially kind of like a VR kind of goggle thing that's manipulating the brain. And they have horrific, nightmarish, machine-y bodies. And they have no idea what they're even doing, but they're accidentally killing more people. But they are 100% lies, right? So I did that with that books, and where I was going with this, tying it back to Colonel, is so that Song of Kamaria is the sound that they hear, that the Orkney hear, right? Colonel sees the sight. He's a witness to something called the sight on Orist. where all those people used to be able to see the site, and it helps them kind of like just understand things in a more unique way to their people and stuff. These ideas are sisters to each other, right? Like I did that on purpose. These it's not like I ran out of ideas and I just made up a different thing. You know?
Yeah.
I literally did it in a way that I'm like, okay, if this is the same universe, this idea of what the Song of Kamaria is could, in theory, be a different sensation to something else somewhere else in the universe, because it's such a big universe, you know. So it's cool. But the sad thing is, spoiler alert, is that Kurnault's the last one that can actually do that, because everybody else is dead. But that whole like what's cool is I could write prequels about every single one of these characters, and I feel like it would be interesting, you know, like, because I feel like seeing the last days of Orist, or the ghosts of Orist, or whatever I would call it, I think would be just a cool novel, you know, like it would have nothing to do with Laborde or anything going on, so you could just read it as it is or whatever. And then if you didn't know he ends up in Down Below Beyond, you'd be like, oh, cool, you know. But if you read just Down Below Beyond, you wouldn't care, you know. You'd be like, oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, you would still, you get, you know what I'm saying? Where it's like, yeah, you like him, but you like him even more, you know, or something like that. So cool. Yeah, and same with I think for Floam, the brainstorm idea title for a prequel about her would be like Supernova Wildflower or something like that.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, very punk rock kind of like, you know, cool vibe. Yeah, and I don't quite know to go with it, but it'd probably be like a teenager version of her and Bobsy doing something. Very like, you know, rebellious punk
Sign
rock,
me up.
thievery. Yeah, it would be very cool. And it's funny because the name on that one alone, I'm like, I should just write that, because I really just want to publish a book called that.
Title is quite fabulous. Yeah,
it's a very cool title. It's one of those cart before the horse, but
you know what? I definitely name books before I write them sometimes.
Yeah, well, Down Below Beyond kind of got there that way, because I just like so I'm glad I tied it. Spoiler alert, it ties in at the end. You get what actually that word means. But like whatchamacallit, the name comes from literally words I like in books. So Fire Upon the Deep, I like things that are downward or under something, and then I like the word far away, beyond. So down, under, and far away, I like any of the words that involve that. So I'm like, what can I name my new book? Down Below Beyond. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, yeah. So that's sadly, I'm not that clever. I'm just
I don't know. That's a good naming device. Right? Like, that works. Yeah.
Appealing words, I guess. I don't know. But then it's funny because like when they, you know, they do the corny thing, but I think I pulled it off this time, where they actually say the title of the book in the book. I'm like, but it works here.
But
like
it works.
It makes the whole, you know, novel makes. Why did you call it this? Oh, okay. You know, and that came naturally. I was not anticipating actually using those words in that order at all. And I'm like, oh wait, but here.
But it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my question for you at the end here is, what is next? So for people that are loving Song of Kamaria, loving Down Below Beyond, you kind of mentioned you've got some things in the works that you're looking at. Another standalone.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we kind of, so it's one of a couple ideas. It's gonna be one at a time, I think.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's also room for a potential anthology thing where it's a bunch of little stories, you know.
Yeah.
It's just like whatever idea hits me the hardest. The idea of like the Voyalton coming in and seeing gate slingers just running amok and kind of like, you know, but at the same time, I want to make sure each one is standalone, you know, like, because so that way anybody can hop in wherever they want. And like I said, I'm very cautious of the sanctity of calling it standalone, because I don't want to feel like, oh, I called it a standalone. Oh, you know what? I'm going to write 5 more, you know. But then and then it's like, oh, well, you said it was a standalone, you know, like that. I do feel like honestly, I'm having a little bit of success with the standalone approach, where you know, I feel like with the trilogy, it was very fulfilling to make it, but you know, you do lose people as you keep going on because the commitment of it and stuff like that. But it's nice to just have things people you can throw out in the world. It's also easier to market them because you don't have to be like, well, it's book 3 of a thing that you may not have seen or read,
Yeah, right.
So yeah, but I'm hoping, so it's either going to be like kind of a sequel idea where, it takes place after what happens in Down Below Beyond, but it doesn't matter, you don't have to read it, or it'll be one of those multiple prequels I mentioned, because like I said, I like all of these characters. I could really make any one of them. I'd probably leave Lavort alone because he's had his time. Like if I were to do it, I don't think I would make Lavort a main character ever again.
Yeah.
Just because he's had his story. It's great. I like it a lot. I'm not going to mess with it anymore. But Film and Bobsy have room to explore, whether that be in prequel or sequel format. And then, or Colonel. I like that idea of just having a world like that, because that's got a lot of strife in it and stuff. So nothing concrete at the moment. I feel bad because, like I was telling you before we started this, I just did a podcast with somebody, but the podcast doesn't go out till next week, and I'm like, oh, nothing, no ideas. But then over the week,
a week later, well, let me tell you.
So this is gonna feel, so if anybody looks at that podcast after this, it'll seem like I ran. I saw, all those ideas are gone. I just forgot them all. Tell me what they were again. But yeah, no, so we'll see, I guess, is the best thing I could say.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. I love all of those options, so I'm definitely excited to see where the tides take you next, because I think, like you said, there's a lot of open doors, I think, in the world with these characters. And that was the fun part, is like, it's rare in a motley crew of characters that I'll read anything about any of these characters. Like I really enjoy all of them.
That's great to hear.
Oh yeah, I'm excited.
Another idea, just off the cuff too, was making separate books about each of the different worlds too. Like, because I had a very, 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 very rough idea of basing one on a Kurakoid on Kurika. So the little frog people. They repeat the first word of every sentence they say. But it would be like a fantasy book though, because they're stuck in like a medieval kind of primitive level tech. So it would be this like weird fantasies just shoved into the middle of this sci-fi.
You know what? That's the beauty of it, though.
Yeah. It's a good playground. Right. I have a big sandbox, like, so it's fun. That's really, really
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope that I hope that one of those is the next mood, right, and that it's a really fun time for you, because it's fun when you read, as another writer, when you read characters that you're like, oh, I'd love to write a character like this, and like so I'm excited for you.
Oh
yeah. So, well, huge amounts of best wishes for the future success of both the trilogy and the standalones. I'm very excited to read In the Orbit of Sirens now, especially, and it's been on the TBR, and I've been excited to read it, and Down Below Beyond just made it even more exciting. So, looking forward to it.
Thought you cried in Down Below Beyond.
You've made me a little nervous, I'm not gonna lie.
Probably not In the Orbit of Sirens, but like the next two. Right.
Well, I'll let you know. I'll send you a message.
Yeah, there you go.
Tom, you did it.
Swear at me or whatever.
Valid. Yeah. Those are the fun messages as authors to get, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I did every time. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I'm also not sorry. I did.
It's same. Exactly same. Yeah. That's why I can't really be mad when other authors do it to me, because I know I'm just being a hypocrite.
Yeah. It's like, I earned this.
Why are you doing this to me? I know I did it to you. That's not beside the point.
You're not supposed to do it back.
You're not supposed to do it back. All right. Well, Tom, thank you so much again for coming on the channel and hanging out with us, and huge amounts of best wishes for your books. And I'm excited to read whatever it is that comes next after this. Thank you everybody in the chat for hanging out with us. And
thank you everybody, and thank you for having me. This was so
fun. Absolutely. I'm sure it will not be the last.
I'm down for anything, man.
Awesome.
Like, these are so fun.
This is my favorite part of the channel.
Yeah, and congrats on your upcoming book as well. And
Thank you.
good luck. And
the pressure is real.
you got it. You do it.
All right.
All
Thank you,
right.
everybody. We'll have a good night, and we will see you in the next video.
Yep. Bye-bye.